Hey everyone. So last year I didn't do that much flying compared to normal, but I still managed to get in a few crashes. So in this video I'm just going to talk you through 4 crashes that I had last year. Got a couple with the Zcon, a big one with the big Drak, and we're just going to start off with a silly one with this Delta Strike that you can see flying around the screen now. I found that all is well and good when you're flying this thing nice and quickly, but once you start to slow it down at landing, it gets quite twitchy and roll, and it makes it a bit harder to land as accurately as you'd like to. No excuses really here because it is a big open field, but I was trying to land it quite close to myself, and this is what happened. Yeah, it looked like it hit me right in the head, but actually it hit my shoulder. It didn't hurt, it did make me laugh at the time, and it still makes me laugh now watching it back. The only damage I did was I broke the cable that links the Vista to the camera. Apart from that, the airframe was good. Okay, so on to the big crash with the big Drak. So this had previously seen 283 kilometers an hour with the new KO motor that I fitted. But it was also reaching up to 208 amps on launch, and I was running 155 ampere C, so I decided it was time for an upgrade. So I fitted the APD 200 ampere C, but I also think that the LiPo I was using wasn't really up to the task. So I'd recently purchased a couple of quite expensive Turnigy Graphene 6S LiPos for a FunJet project I was working on. So the plan was to use them. Even though my 2 bad throws that I've ever done with this have not ended up being the cause of a crash, they've been both the flights where they have ended with a crash. The flight only lasted 2 minutes, and it's actually really windy, but it's kind of hard to tell with the Drak because it just handles it so well. But anyway, as you'll see in a moment, I throttle up to 100% and I lose complete control, and it goes into the ground. At this point I had no idea what the problem was, but it felt to me at the time like I'd lost a servo, so my first thought was that the 5-volt BEC that powers the servos had failed, but we'll go into that shortly. So pausing it here just before impact, you can see it was travelling at 223 kilometers an hour, which is around 139 miles per hour. So I really expected this would be a complete mess. I definitely wasn't prepared for how well this thing would be wedged into the ground. It dug itself so deep. I don't think I've ever seen a radio control plane bury itself this badly before. If you watch from this next clip, I'm not going to talk over it, but you'll see how much force I'm having to put into pulling it out of the ground. And also just take note of how windy it was that day. So yeah, there was a good bit of damage to the Drak, but considering this is a really heavy plane and it was travelling at around 140 miles an hour head on into the ground, it actually held up pretty well. But at this point I'm thinking, I don't think I want to repair this again. I already have done a massive repair job on the nose of this one, and yeah, at this point I'm thinking this is just going to be a write-off. However, I did think I best not make any quick decisions, so I thought I'll strip it down, see how it looks, and then I will put it away in the attic until I decide what I want to do with it. Because at this moment in time I just didn't have the energy or the heart to go through that big repair job again. So this is what it looked like after I'd removed the laminate and the vinyl. And that's exactly how it looks today still, because it is still in the attic. The wings are in pretty much perfect condition still. They've still got the laminate and the vinyl on them because they pretty much took on 0 damage at all. And at the time I wasn't actually that bothered about the fact that I had smashed up the Drak. Definitely not as upset as the first time round, and the most annoying thing this time was actually that I just wrecked 2 brand new batteries that got a total of 2 minutes flight time before I had to bin them. And not only that, I had to buy another pair of them again because I needed them for the fun jet. Okay, so let's go back to the cause of this crash. Firstly, the amazing thing is that after I inspected the electronics from the Drak, nothing was broken. Everything is in perfect condition and still working. That's even the 2 cameras in the nose, the servos, the flight controller, motor, speed controller, everything still works electronically, nothing was damaged. So back to the crash site where I found the Drak. The left wing had come off, but everything was fine on it. The control linkage was all still good, the servo was still good. However, the right wing, which had maybe not even touched the ground, because it wasn't touching the ground when I found it, the linkage had disconnected from the control horn on the control surface. So my suspicion is that is what happened during the flight, which caused the sudden loss of control. The electronics being in perfect working order and with no other signs of mechanical failure, I find it hard to believe that anything else caused this crash. I also still don't believe that the impact on the ground is what made the control horn let go of the linkage. And also going back to my gut feeling, the moment it happened I felt like I lost a servo, and basically this disconnecting would have felt exactly like that. Okay, on to the next crash, which is with my Zcon wing. And basically here I'm just doing one of my usual little routes following a river down the side of the valley. And at this time of year there's a lot less greenery on the trees, so they've lost their leaves and they can be a lot harder to spot. And I've been very close on many occasions to hitting them, but obviously at this point I did go through quite a thick tree, and this was at over 100 miles per hour. At this point I'm fairly surprised that it actually managed to stay in the air, and I can obviously see there's a lot of vibration, so I'm just hoping that I'm going to be able to limp it back to home. I think the only reason I made it through that tree is because I was going so fast. Honestly, if I was going a bit slower, I think that just would have taken me out the sky. Okay, so here's the DVR footage of that same incident. And I think watching the action cam footage, it looked fairly obvious that the tree was there in front of me, but watching the live feed like this, I think you'll be a bit more understanding as to why I hit that tree. It's definitely not as obvious. Moments after the impact, the artificial horizon just starts to go completely bonkers, and obviously that's due to all the vibration. Just a fun little fact, I can hear this Zcon screaming away flying down this river at this moment in time. It is a loud wing. And at the moment of impact, I was 2,580 meters from home, but from what I could hear, it didn't sound like anything bad had happened. And that is because the speed of sound is 343 meters per second roughly, which means it took a whole 7.5 seconds before I actually heard the massive crashing sound from it going through that tree. Anyway, after that I was able to fly all the way back to the launching point and land, and let's take a look and see what damage was done during that crash. At first glance it doesn't really look too bad, but going through a fairly thick tree at such high speed, it has cut into the leading edge in a number of places, as you can see right here. There's another small cut here, a small one here, quite a large one there, and the top half of the Dragonlink dipole had just fallen down loose, but even worse, on the underside the ground element had been completely ripped off. I was quite thankful and impressed that I didn't lose my control link. If you watch back the DVR footage, you will see that the RSSI does suffer a little bit. You'll see it getting kind of as low as around 30 now and then. The prop was pretty badly damaged, but that was obviously going to be the case. You could tell from the vibration, and also by the fact that it sounded a bit like a tractor when it was coming back. Everything in the electronics bay was all good, and you can just see across the valley over here, this is the river that was coming down when I hit the tree. So basically the repair job for this was I injected E6000 into where all the splits were in the wing, re-laminated over the leading edge, fitted a new prop and fitted a new Dragon Link dipole, and it was ready to go again. Okay, so on to the fourth and final crash, which is again the Zcon wing. So I'm just doing some nice low flying, again over 100 miles per hour. It's actually very dark, but very hard to tell because the FPV camera is just so good in low light. And yeah, I guess I just slightly misjudged this. I didn't think I was going to hit the ground, but I did. Amazingly, that's another 100-mile-per-hour crash with this wing, where it has managed to stay in the air flying. However, this time I am concerned that I've lost my control link and that I'm going to have to let this thing circle around me in return to home until it runs out of battery. However, about 20 seconds later I realised I had regained my control link and that I just needed to wiggle my stick so I could take control and land this thing. So this is the underside of the wing, and this is where I have my receiver installed, and I think the reason that I lost my control link is if this wing is bent enough at the tip, what it actually does is it kind of pulls the single S-bus cable off my Dragon Link receiver. And when I did look at the receiver after the crash, this connector here was only just touching back on the pins. So I think as the wing flexed, it briefly pulled this connector right off, and then as the wing resumed its shape, it just about pushed it on enough for it to make a connection. So I've since sorted that out so that the cable has a bit more slack in it and can move with the receiver. Watching it back in slow motion, it actually looks worse than in full speed. It hit the ground quite close to where my spotter was stood, and he said it looked like the wing did a whole flip. Anyway, the only damage on this was actually the winglet got ripped off, and everything else was absolutely fine. And that was recovered and glued back on. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed my crashes and close calls. I've got some cool new planes to maiden this year, so I really hope I'm not going to be bringing you another crash video next year. Thanks for watching.